Hello, and welcome to Gloomy Realm. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that lead you into forgotten places and the hidden corners of the night, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable, let your body settle into stillness, and allow the sounds of the outside world to slowly fade away. Tonight, we venture beyond the familiar, into a place where old stories still whisper, and the shadows keep secrets of their own. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself wander through the gloomy realm. Story 1, I had not even opened the first box in my new apartment when someone knocked on the door. For a second, I just stood there in the middle of the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes, sweating through my shirt and wondering if I had already made a mistake by moving in. The place still smelled like dust, old paint, and the hot plastic smell that comes from window blinds that had been baking in the sun all day. I had only been there for maybe 20 minutes. My mattress was still leaning against the bedroom wall, my dishes were wrapped in newspaper, my books were stacked in a box by my feet, and already someone was knocking. I walked over and looked through the peephole. An older man stood outside. His hair was tied back in a ponytail, and his gray mustache moved slightly as he breathed through his mouth. His face was lined and weathered, the kind of face that looked like it had spent a lot of years in the sun and did not care much about sunscreen. It was my landlord, Henderson. At least, I thought Henderson was his name. I had never been sure if it was his first name or last name. He had introduced himself only as Henderson the first time we spoke, and I had been too awkward to ask. I opened the door. "Hey, new tenant," he said. "How are you doing? Getting settled in?" I looked back at the boxes and gave a tired little nod. Yeah, just, unpacking my stuff. I had gotten lucky with the apartment, or at least I had thought so. It was in a pretty trendy neighborhood, the kind of place full of coffee shops, small bars, people walking dogs, and young professionals pretending they were not struggling to pay rent. The building itself was small, maybe 6 units total, tucked between nicer places that probably cost twice as much. I had emailed the listing at the right time, and Henderson had answered almost immediately. Before I knew it, I had paid first month, last month, and a security deposit. A week later, I was packing my life into boxes. "Good to hear," Henderson said. "Listen, I was going over some stuff." Of course, I thought. Typical landlord behavior. Wait until the tenant has moved the last box inside, then suddenly show up with bad news. Maybe there was a leak. Maybe the stove did not work. Maybe he had forgotten to mention the place had a roach problem. I just hoped it was not the air conditioner, because the apartment was already warm, and the air outside felt thick enough to chew. "It's just the paperwork, you see," he continued. "One last page you forgot to initial." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper. I took it from him and looked it over. A strange sense of recognition passed through me. When he had first given me the lease agreement, he had not handed me a neat folder or a stapled packet. He had just given me a loose stack of about 5 papers, all slightly bent, none of them organized in any obvious way. At the time, I remembered thinking this page had been some kind of joke that accidentally got mixed in with the real lease, because the contents were ridiculous. The first line said the vents were old and sometimes rattled, and that I did not hear voices in them. The second line said Henderson did not have a brother, and if anyone claimed to be his brother, I needed to notify Henderson immediately. The third line said there were absolutely no returns of deposits. I looked from the paper to him. "Sorry," I said slowly. I thought this was like a joke of some kind. Henderson did not smile. "No, It's part of our standard paperwork. Do people really think they hear voices from the vents? It happened a long time ago, he said. One of our old tenants kept calling me up, saying someone was talking to her through the vents. So I added it as a warning for new residents, just to clear things up early. I stared at him for a moment, trying to decide if he was serious. He looked serious. All right, I said. Kind of weird, but okay. Do you need a pen? Henderson asked. Before I could answer, he reached into his other pocket and pulled out a black ballpoint pen. He clicked it and handed it to me. I placed the crumpled paper on top of one of my boxes so I could write on it. As I leaned over to initial the lines, I glanced at the second one again. Thanks, I said. So, you don't have a brother? Nope. I read the line one more time. So does someone try to pretend to be your brother? Henderson rubbed at his mustache and looked toward the stairs for a moment. It's a strange tale, he said. Another thing that happened once. But I don't want to bog you down with old stories from years ago. I was glad he did not want to explain further. It was starting to get dark outside, and I still had half my life in boxes. The last thing I needed was to stand in the doorway listening to my landlord tell me about vents and fake brothers. All right, I said. I put my initials beside each line and scribbled something that looked enough like my signature at the bottom. Then I handed the paper back. Thank you, Henderson said, folding it and slipping it back into his pocket. Well, I guess it's time to start tying them on. I don't live too far from here. I missed beer 30 earlier, so I've got to make up for it. But if you have any issues, just let me know. In the morning, of course. He gave a quick wave and turned toward the front door of the building. I did the polite thing and walked him out. From the landing, I watched him climb into an older pickup truck, start the engine, and drive away into the evening. When I went back inside, the apartment felt even quieter than before. I opened the first box, the one full of books, and began pulling them out. I stacked them neatly on the floor because I had not decided where the bookshelf would go yet. It was not a huge place, but I did not need a lot of space. Not really. A living room, a small kitchen, a modest bedroom, and a bathroom. For the price and the neighborhood, it was better than anything else I had found. So Henderson was odd. Fine, lots of landlords were odd. At least this one had not tried to charge me an extra pet deposit, even though I did not own a pet. I moved to the next box. That was when I heard the sound. At first, I thought someone outside was playing music with heavy bass. It was low and rhythmic, like someone keeping a steady beat on a tom drum. Thump, 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 not fast, not random. It had a pattern. I stopped unpacking and listened. The sound came again. Thump, then again. Thump, I walked through the living room, careful not to trip over the boxes, and tried to follow it. The walls were thin enough that it could have been a neighbor, though I hoped that was not the case. I had lived in places where I could hear people cough through the walls, and I was not excited to do that again. I stepped into the tiny kitchen. It had an oven, an old fridge, and barely enough counter space for a microwave. Being a young professional in a trendy neighborhood did not mean I could afford luxuries like decent counters, modern appliances, or cabinets that closed properly. I opened the refrigerator and looked inside, mostly because I wanted an excuse to check if it was making the noise. It was not. The thumping continued. I left the kitchen and walked into the bedroom. My full-size mattress leaned against the wall and took up most of the space even standing upright. A couple of boxes marked clothes sat near the closet. The sound was quieter in there. I opened the closet anyway, feeling like a child checking for monsters. Nothing. The sound kept going. The only room left was the bathroom. It was small, just a toilet, sink, and a narrow shower with a cheap plastic curtain. The moment I stepped inside, the thumping grew louder. I looked around, already feeling annoyed. The last thing I wanted to deal with on move-in night was plumbing. Nothing says welcome home like a broken pipe or a leak behind the wall. I checked under the sink, I checked near the toilet, I listened close to the shower head and the pipes behind the wall. The noise did not seem to come from any of them. Then I turned and saw the vent above the bathroom doorway. That was where the sound came from. Henderson had called it a rattle. I felt like his definition of a rattle was very different from mine. This was not some loose vent cover shaking a little when the air came on. This was a steady thump, like someone tapping from the other side with a patient hand. There was nothing I could do about it right then. I was tired, sweaty, and in no mood to climb around looking for tools I had not unpacked yet. I went back to the living room and continued opening boxes. As soon as I left the bathroom, the sound stopped. I stood still for a moment, listening. Nothing. I told myself maybe it was temporary. Old vents, old building, weird air pressure. Whatever. As long as it did not happen all night, I could live with it. A car pulled up outside, breaking the quiet. A moment later, I heard doors open, followed by footsteps, chatter, and laughter. The group seemed to stop near my unit. I could see their shadows move across the light coming through the window. A woman's voice said, "Looks like we got another new neighbor." A man answered, "For now." The girl who lived here before didn't stay long. I feel like she just left in the middle of the night. They laughed. Their footsteps moved away, and a door shut somewhere nearby. I looked around my half-unpacked apartment and felt a little less comfortable than before. I hoped they were just loud. I hoped my walls were not actually that thin. But I also did not like what the guy had said. The girl before me had left in the middle of the night. I tried to keep unpacking, but then the bathroom vent started again. Thump, 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 my patience cracked. I marched back into the bathroom and looked up at the vent. It was just high enough that I could not reach it comfortably. I stood on my toes, stretching my arm, trying to grab the little lever to close it. My fingers brushed it but slipped away. I jumped once, missed, jumped again, caught part of it. For a few awkward seconds, I hopped around in my own bathroom like an idiot, trying to force the vent shut. Finally, I grabbed the lever and pulled hard enough that the cover snapped closed. The thumping stopped. I took a deep breath. Then something hit my front door. It was a loud, heavy thud that seemed to shake the whole apartment. I froze. Had I been making too much noise? Had a neighbor come to complain because I was jumping around like a fool? Another thud hit the door. This one was harder, more aggressive. "Hello?" I called. There was a third thud, but this one was slower. Deliberate after the impact. I heard the soft scrape of something sliding down the wood, like a hand dragging along the surface. My mouth went dry. I walked toward the entryway and looked through the peephole. Whoever had knocked was not standing right in front of the door. They were several feet back, maybe 6 or 7 feet away. The outside walkway was dim, and they stood just outside the reach of the weak porch light. I could not see details at first. Then I made out 2 things. They had messy, unkempt hair. And they were completely naked. Even in the darkness, I could tell it was an older man. His body was covered in wrinkles and loose, sagging skin. He stood with his shoulders hunched and his head tilted forward, hair hanging around his face. I stepped back from the peephole, unable to think clearly. For a second, I considered doing nothing. Maybe he would go away. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe this was just one of those awful city moments where you pretend not to see the strange thing because getting involved can only make it worse. Then his body twitched. Not a normal twitch. His whole frame jerked violently, like something inside him had pulled a cord too hard. His neck snapped to one side, then corrected itself. His shoulders shuddered. He remained standing, but the movement was wrong enough to send a chill through me. I grabbed my phone. Another thud hit the door. Then a muffled, raspy voice came through the wood. "Please," the man said. "Let me in." I forced myself to look through the peephole again. This time, he stepped closer. I saw the gray mustache beneath the wild hair. I saw the shape of his face, the same lines, the same nose, the same eyes. He looked exactly like Henderson. My stomach tightened. I said, my voice unsteady. "Why?" The man came closer and pressed his mouth directly against the keyhole. His lips pulled back slightly, showing dark, stained, cracked teeth, because my brother put something in there that I need. The words from the lease came back to me at once. Henderson does not have a brother. I swallowed. The landlord says he doesn't have a brother. He does, the man hissed, and he makes him live in a maintenance closet. A normal person might have called the police right then. I probably should have, but nothing about the situation felt normal, and fear has a strange way of making you ask questions you should not ask. Why would he do that? I asked. The man leaned closer to the peephole, too close. Why does he hide what he has in your apartment? That is what you should be asking. My grip tightened around my phone. What does he have in my apartment? "Let me in, and I will show you," he growled. "No," I said. "That's not happening. Go away, or I will call the police. I will be gone before they get here," he said. "Now let me in." "Back to the maintenance closet?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Couldn't I just tell them you're there?" His face changed. For a moment, I saw something like panic under the filth and madness. "I am the only one who can stop it," he rasped. "I am the only one who can stop what will happen to you." I stepped away from the peephole and scrolled through my contacts until I found Henderson's number. "I am calling your brother right now." I shouted through the door. Silence came from the other side. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Henderson finally answered. His voice sounded thick and slow. "Hello?" "Hey," I said, trying not to sound as scared as I felt. "So, I don't really know how to explain this, but there's a naked guy outside my door claiming to be your brother." There was a pause. "I don't see how that would be possible," Henderson said. His voice was heavy, like he had already started drinking. "But I can't help you right now, so I should call the police?" No, he said quickly. "They wouldn't be able to help you." That did not make me feel better. "Do you have anything made of actual iron in your home?" he asked. "What? Why? Do you?" "I'm just going to call the police," I said. "Listen," Henderson replied. "I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a little drunk right now, but I sober up fast, and I can help. But I need your help first." "Yeah," I said. "I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to call the cops." 6 months, he said. I blinked. "What?" 6 months. Free rent. I stared at the wall. "Say that again?" "Free rent for 6 months, Henderson repeated. I almost forgot about the naked man outside my door. In 2026, an offer like that was not just good. It was unreal. People were paying half their income for apartments with mold in the bathroom. Free rent for 6 months sounded like something from a fairy tale, and maybe that should have been my first warning. "Did you say free rent for 6 months?" I asked. "I did," Henderson said. "And to sweeten the deal, I won't raise your rent by 20% when you renew your lease." That should have sounded insane. It did sound insane. But in this economy, it did not take me long to make a decision. So, I said carefully, "What do I have to do?" "I need you to buy me some time to make a pot of coffee and drive back there," Henderson said. "If you can lure him back to the maintenance closet, that would be great." "How do I do that?" "Find something made of iron and threaten him with it. I'll be there as soon as I can." Then he hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, trying to figure out if I owned anything made of actual iron. Another heavy thud hit the door. I leaned toward the peephole again. This time, the man was right on the other side. His eye filled the little glass circle. It was hollow, bloodshot, and too wide. "He will eventually get you too," the man whispered. "Even though you aren't the normal type." I pulled back a little. "Normal type?" I asked. "Usually, the spell is used on women," he said, "like the last few tenants." My skin prickled. "All right," I muttered. "This is just crazy. Weird lease agreements, twin brothers, and now magic." "He is not my brother," the man hissed. "He only says that when I try to save the poor souls he rents to. And I bet he told you to hit me with iron too." I said nothing. "It doesn't matter what you hit me with," he continued. "It hurts the same either way." But iron really hurts him. The figure moved away from the door, sinking back into the shadows of the walkway. Against every smart instinct in my body, I put the chain lock on the door and opened it just a crack. I kept my foot pressed behind it and leaned close enough to see him through the gap. "So, what is the Henderson who was here earlier?" I asked. The naked man turned his head toward me. His movements were jerky and wrong, as if someone else was trying to operate him from a distance. "I don't know exactly what he is," he said. "But that unit you are standing in, that is where he does all his strange magic." "Here we go again," I muttered. "He has had about 4 tenants in this unit over the last 18 months, the man continued. "They all did exactly what you are doing right now. They talked to me. They doubted me. They asked questions through the door, and they all ended the same way." "How?" I asked, even though I did not want to know. "Hollowed out," he said. "Husks. He eats what is left of them. Not their flesh. Their souls." I stared at him. He took a step closer. At this point, half of them do not even finish unpacking before he does it. The apartment behind me suddenly felt less like a home and more like a trap. My boxes were still sealed. My books were stacked on the floor. My mattress was not even on its frame yet. "He eats them?" I asked. The man nodded, but the motion turned into another violent twitch. His head snapped, his shoulders jerked, and for one terrible second I thought he might fall. "He does it for the soul," he said, "not the meat. And the proof is in your unit." He took another step forward. "Are you going to let me in or not?" We stared at each other through the narrow opening of the door, him standing naked in the humid night, looking like a broken copy of my landlord. Me standing inside, with one hand on the door and the other gripping my phone, just wanting to finish unpacking and pretend this was not happening. His head jerked again, cocking toward his shoulder. "What if you are making all this up?" I asked. "Why would I do that?" "I don't know," I said. "What if you're just some kind of tweaker? You're naked, you're twitching, and you have a whole story about magic and soul-eating landlords. It's because of his magic," he said, his voice rising. Every time he casts the spell, he takes a little more from me. Or, I said, you're a drug addict with a really weird story. One that lines up nicely with a guy offering me free rent. Something in his face changed when I said that. The anger faded, just for a second, and something hurt looked out from behind it. You think I chose this? He said quietly. You think I like standing out here naked, begging some kid half my age to believe me? Then his neck twitched hard again. Before I could respond, he charged. I fell backward as his hand smashed through the crack in the door. His fingers clawed at the inside of my apartment, slapping wildly against the wood and the frame. The chain strained against the force of him. He screamed as he tried to force his way in. I am trying to help you, goddamn fool. I am trying to save your life. That was when a truck skidded into the parking lot outside. I recognized the sound before I saw it. The same old pickup Henderson had driven away in earlier. The naked man shoved harder against the door. Let me in, he shrieked. We can stop him together. Nope, I thought. I scrambled backward across the floor, trying to reach my phone where I had dropped it. Then I heard the one sound I absolutely did not want to hear. The chain lock snapped. The metal links clattered onto the floor. The door flew open. The naked man burst inside and threw himself on top of me. He grabbed me by the collar of my shirt with both hands. His skin was hot and damp. His breath smelled sour and rotten. Why won't you let me save you? He screamed. A second later, Henderson appeared in the doorway. His face was red. His hair was loose now, hanging around his shoulders. He looked drunk, but not nearly as drunk as he had sounded over the phone. How did you escape that maintenance closet? Henderson growled. He moved faster than I expected. He lunged forward, grabbed the naked man by the neck, and threw him off me like he weighed nothing. The man crashed into my half-unpacked boxes. Books scattered across the floor. One box split open, spilling clothes everywhere. I crawled away, spotted my phone on the floor, and reached for it. Henderson saw me. He snatched it first. What are you doing? I shouted. I can't have you calling the cops, Henderson said. His voice was tense, but not scared. My head spun as I pushed myself to my feet. The naked old man lay among my books and belongings, coughing, shaking, trying to lift himself on one elbow. See? The man gasped. He needs me close. What more proof do you need? Shut up, Henderson screamed. The sound of his voice made me flinch. What does he mean? I asked, looking between them. Why can't we call the cops? Because he can't take my blood anymore, the naked man said from the floor. Before he could say anything else, Henderson kicked him in the ribs. The sound was horrible. A deep, wet crack. I told you to shut up. Henderson roared. I backed away toward the kitchen. What is he talking about? I shouted. The answer is in the vents, the naked man wheezed. It's all in there. Vials of my blood. The deed to this property. From before they took it over. My mouth went dry. What is he talking about, Henderson? The naked man coughed and clutched his side. Why hasn't anyone come to investigate? Why hasn't anyone called the cops? I froze. He was right. The fight had been loud. The door had slammed open. Someone had screamed. Boxes had crashed. Henderson had shouted. A naked man had broken into my apartment. Any normal building would have reacted by now. Doors opening. Neighbors yelling. Someone calling 911. Someone asking what was going on. But outside my unit, there was only silence. No footsteps. No voices. No concerned neighbors. Nothing. It was as if everyone nearby expected this to happen, or worse, as if they knew better than to get involved. What is he talking about? I asked again, but this time my voice was almost a whisper. Henderson looked at me. For the first time since I had met him, all the friendly landlord warmth left his face. It was not a slow change. It vanished all at once. His posture straightened. His eyes sharpened. His smile disappeared. "Don't listen to him," he said. "He's not well. Then why do you keep him in a maintenance closet instead of getting him help?" Henderson stared at me for a moment. Then he sighed. "Because he's right," he said. "I do need him alive." The room seemed to tilt. "And he's right about the other thing too," Henderson continued. "No one is calling the police because, as he said, we took this over." The naked man pushed himself up onto his hands and knees. Blood ran from his mouth onto the floor. "He's going to kill you," he wheezed. A lump formed in my throat. "So," I said slowly, "are you going to kill me?" The thing wearing Henderson's face tilted its head, thinking about it as if I had asked a normal business question. "That depends," he said. "On what? On whether you are useful." The naked man groaned from the floor. Henderson pointed at him. "Help me drag him back to his cage in the maintenance closet, and the same deal stands. 6 months of free rent. No increase when it's time to sign your next lease." I stared at him. "But you won't kill me?" I asked. Henderson shook his head smoothly. "Too smoothly. You will simply be a human living among the Fae," he said. "And I will move my feeding room to another empty unit." The word Fae should have sounded impossible, ridiculous, like something from old stories, not something standing in my apartment beside a broken chain lock and a bleeding naked man. But suddenly, everything began to make a terrible kind of sense. The lease rules, the vents, the fake brother warning, the tenants who left in the middle of the night, the neighbors who did not come out, the offer of free rent so good it felt unreal. No human landlord would ever offer a deal like that, especially not in 2026. I looked down at the real Henderson, or the man who might have been the real Henderson, shaking on the floor among my books. His eyes met mine, wide and desperate. "Please," he whispered. "Don't." I thought about what he had told me. I thought about the vents, the vials, the deed, the possibility that he was telling the truth. I thought about the girl who had lived there before me and left in the middle of the night, if she had left at all. I thought about the others, the women, the hollowed husks, the feeding room. Then I thought about rent. I hated myself for that. But I thought about it anyway. I thought about my bank account. I thought about how much I had already paid just to move in. I thought about the security deposit I would never get back. I thought about how impossible it had been to find a place in this neighborhood, and how I would probably never find another one. I thought about 6 months without rent, and no 20% increase at renewal. In this economy, morality had started to feel like a luxury item. Henderson watched me carefully. The thing wearing his face smiled, just a little. "So?" it asked. I nodded. The naked man let out a broken sound. I bent down, grabbed his ankles, and helped drag him out of the apartment. He fought at first, but he was too injured to do much. His hands clawed at the floorboards. His fingers caught on one of my books, dragging it with him until it slipped free. He whispered to me the whole time, "He'll do it to you too." I kept walking. "You think you made a deal?" I tightened my grip. "You think you're different." The thing wearing Henderson's face pulled him by the wrists, and together we dragged him across the threshold. The hallway outside was empty. Not one door opened. Not one neighbor looked out. The air smelled sweet, like wet flowers after rain, though there had been no rain. Somewhere behind the walls, the vents began to rattle again. Only this time, beneath the rattle, I thought I heard voices. They were faint. So faint I could almost pretend they were not there. Almost, we dragged the old man toward the maintenance closet at the end of the building. He kept turning his head to look back at me, his eyes full of rage and terror and something worse than both. "Disappointment, you signed the paper," he whispered. "What?" I asked before I could stop myself. He coughed. Blood spotted his lips. "You signed it," he said again. "That's how he gets in." The thing wearing Henderson's face stopped walking. For a moment the hallway went perfectly still. Then it turned its head toward me and smiled. "Don't worry," it said. "Standard paperwork." The maintenance closet door opened by itself. Inside, it was much darker than it should have been. There were no shelves, no mop buckets, no tools, just a deep black space that seemed to stretch farther back than the building allowed. From somewhere inside, I heard a wet breathing sound. The old man screamed then, not in anger, not even in pain. He screamed like someone being taken somewhere he had already been too many times. Henderson dragged him inside, and the darkness swallowed both of them. The door shut. I stood alone in the hallway, breathing hard, my hands shaking, my palms slick with sweat that was not all mine. A few seconds later, the door opened again. The thing wearing Henderson's face stepped out, brushing dust from its sleeves. It looked perfectly normal now. Friendly, even. The old landlord's smile was back. The mask was back in place. Well, it said, "That was a rough first night. Sorry about that." I did not answer. It handed my phone back. "I'll have someone come fix your chain lock tomorrow," it said. "No charge, of course." I took the phone. "And the rent?" I asked quietly. Its smile widened. "As promised," it said. 6 months free." Then it leaned closer. The air around it smelled like lavender, iron, and something very old. "Just remember," it whispered, "if you hear voices in the vents, you do not hear voices in the vents." Then it walked away. I went back into my apartment and shut the door as best as I could. The chain was broken, so I pushed a box against it, then another, then the small kitchen chair. After that, I stood in the living room and looked at the mess. My books were scattered everywhere. My clothes were half spilled from boxes. The paper I had signed was gone, probably still in Henderson's pocket. I did not sleep that night. I sat on my mattress on the floor, holding the heaviest thing I owned, which turned out to be a cast iron skillet my mother had given me when I moved out years ago. I had forgotten I packed it. I held it in my lap until morning. Around 3 a.m., the bathroom vent opened by itself. A soft voice came through. It sounded like a woman. "You should have let him in," it whispered. I did not answer. The lease said not to hear voices in the vents, and now, apparently, I was the kind of tenant who followed the lease. Story 2. Her green eyes led me into the green darkness. The forest stretched out around us like it had no end. Tall, evergreen trees stood on every side, rising above us like silent soldiers. Their branches blocked most of the sky, and the little moonlight that did get through only made the woods look deeper and stranger. I could barely see where we were going, but she moved through the trees like she had walked that way 1,000 times before. She knew the path. I did not. Still, I followed her. There was something about her that made it hard not to. Her hand was in mine, soft and warm, and every time I thought about asking her to stop, I would look at her face and forget the question. She was beautiful in a way that did not feel fair. It was not just her looks, either. It was the way she moved, the way she smiled, the way she made the rest of the world feel unimportant. I did not know it then, but she was leading me to my doom. Not in the fast, sudden way people usually imagine doom. It was not a knife in the dark or a fall from a cliff. It was slower than that. Sweeter, more careful, like a fly crawling willingly into the mouth of a Venus flytrap because the trap smells like a flower. The moment I connected with her, there was no real separating us. The cord binds us all. I met her on Tinder. That is not the most romantic beginning. I know. Online dating is a miserable place most of the time. Anyone who has spent long enough on dating apps knows what I mean. You swipe through fake profiles, dead conversations, obvious scams, people who match and never reply, people who reply once and then disappear, and people who seem to have no real interest in meeting anyone at all. I was stupid enough to believe that most people on there were looking for something real. Companionship, a relationship. Maybe even love. I know how foolish that sounds now, but at the time, I was lonely enough to believe almost anything. I kept trying, even after the fake accounts, even after the people who only wanted attention, even after someone tried to convince me to pay for their program, which was clearly just another way to take money from desperate men. I was close to deleting the app completely when I matched with her. Pale skin, red hair, emerald green eyes. Her profile appeared among the endless faces like it had been placed there just for me. I remember staring at her pictures longer than I had stared at anyone else's. She looked almost too perfect to be real, which should have been the first warning. But I had seen enough fake profiles to know when something looked suspicious. And somehow, she did not feel fake. She felt impossible, but not fake. Her name was Rose. I sent one of my usual jokes, the kind I had practiced after failing enough times to understand that hey was not good enough. To my surprise, she replied, not just with a polite laugh or a single word, but with actual interest. She had a sharp sense of humor. She was playful, but not empty. The conversation moved easily, faster than I expected. I tried to keep my expectations low. It was Tinder after all. You learn not to get excited too quickly. A good conversation can die in 5 minutes. A number can be exchanged and then never used. A date can be planned and then canceled with some weak excuse. So even though I felt something spark between us, I kept telling myself not to get carried away. That did not work. We exchanged numbers after a few days, and soon after that, we planned to meet for coffee. I was nervous before the date. Not because I had never been on one, but because I already cared too much. I did not want her to be fake. I did not want the person in the pictures to be someone else. I did not want the connection I had built in my head to fall apart the moment I saw her. But she was real. She was standing outside the cafe when I arrived, wearing a simple dark dress and a light jacket, her red hair falling around her shoulders. When she saw me, she smiled and hugged me. That surprised me. It felt a little unsafe on her part, hugging a man she had only just met in person. But maybe I looked harmless. Maybe I am just very huggable. She was even more beautiful in real life. Her beauty was not cold or distant. It was alive. She looked like the first flower blooming after a long, harsh winter. But beauty was not what I had been searching for. I wanted someone I could talk to, someone who made me feel less alone. Someone whose mind could hold my attention as much as her face did. Rose had that too. She was funny, smart, strange in small ways that made me want to know more. She listened when I spoke, really listened, and when she talked, I found myself leaning closer without noticing. By the end of that first coffee date, I knew I wanted to see her again. Maybe that sounds too fast. Maybe it was too fast. Maybe I was starving for real connection after so many empty conversations and bad dates. Maybe I was lonely enough to mistake attention for destiny. But I swear, this was not just desire. It was not my body doing all the thinking. There was something electric between us. Something that made the air feel different when she looked at me. When we kissed for the first time, I could not stop at one kiss. After that, we kept seeing each other. Coffee became dinner, dinner became long walks became nights at her place. Our relationship moved quickly, but it did not feel rushed at the time. It felt natural, like we were not building something new, but remembering something that had already existed before either of us knew it. I learned little things about her. Her name was Rose, but she hated roses. I found that out the hard way after I brought her a bouquet, thinking it would be sweet. She stared at the flowers with an awkward smile and thanked me in a voice that was far too polite. I never brought her roses again. She lived in a cozy cottage-style house near the woods. I had no idea how she could afford it. It was not huge, but it had that quiet, storybook feeling, with wooden floors, warm lights, old furniture, and windows that looked out toward the forest. It felt like a place from another time. I never heard much about her parents or family, but we were still early in the relationship, so I did not push. Everyone has things they do not talk about right away. For a while, everything felt almost perfect. We kissed, we held hands, we spent nights curled up on her couch, watching shows we were not really paying attention to. Sometimes she would look at me with those green eyes, and I would feel like I had stepped outside the normal world. I kept expecting the relationship to slow down, to become awkward, to fall apart the way so many early relationships do, but it did not. At least, not at first. The first strange night happened at her house. I had stayed over before, so I had no reason to feel worried when she invited me again. We were sitting on the couch, half watching television. I do not even remember what was on. Her head was near my shoulder, and I was trying not to think too hard about how lucky I felt. Then she lifted her head and said, "Do you want to go for a walk?" I looked toward the window. It was dark outside. Very dark. I did not know the exact time, but it had to be close to midnight. Her house bordered the forest, and there were no streetlights out there, no sidewalks, no normal place to walk. Just trees. Sure, I said, though I know my voice sounded uncertain. I thought maybe she meant walking around the yard and looking at the stars. That could be romantic, I told myself. A little sudden, but romantic. She did not explain. She just smiled, got up, and took my hand. We left her warm little house and stepped into the night. The air was cool, crickets chirped somewhere in the grass, an owl called from deep in the trees. The sky was clear, and the stars were brighter than I was used to seeing. I lived in the city, where the sky was usually dull and empty. Out there, the stars looked endless. Rose led me toward the woods. She did not bring a flashlight. She only had her phone, and even that small light barely showed 3 feet in front of us. I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, which suddenly felt like a bad idea. I thought about ticks, mosquitoes, poison ivy, and all the other things that can make a forest unpleasant at night. "Where are we going?" I asked. She did not answer. She just kept walking. I should have stopped then. A reasonable person would have. A reasonable person would have said, "No, seriously, where are we going?" A reasonable person might have turned around and gone back inside, but I was not thinking like a reasonable person. I trusted her, or maybe I wanted so badly to trust her that I ignored the part of me that felt uneasy. So I followed. The forest floor crunched beneath our feet. Branches brushed against my arms. Roots rose out of the ground like traps. At first, I was nervous. But after a while, the beauty of the place started to distract me. I looked up through gaps in the branches and saw the stars shining above us. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could actually see the universe. Then I heard water. At first, it was faint. A soft rush in the distance. The sound grew louder as we walked until it filled the woods around us. Soon, we reached a small waterfall. In daylight, it was probably beautiful in a normal way, but at night, under the moon and stars, with darkness all around it, the waterfall looked almost holy. Water spilled over dark rocks into a cold pool below. Mist hung in the air. The sound of the falling water made everything else feel far away. Rose guided me to a large rock near the water. It sat partly in the pool, just close enough for us to sit on it and dip our feet in. We took off our shoes and socks, and I put my feet into the water. It was freezing, so cold it made my legs tense. For the first time since we entered the woods, she spoke. "Are you afraid to die?" I looked at her. There are not many questions that can ruin the mood faster than that one, especially when you are sitting beside a waterfall in the middle of the woods near midnight. I tried to laugh it off. "Why?" I asked. "Are you going to kill me?" I knew this was too good to be true. I said it in a joking voice, and thankfully, she laughed. "No," she said. "No, just..." She did not finish. I waited, but she did not say anything else. Instead, she rested her head on my shoulder. I looked down at her red hair, then out at the dark water. I wondered if she had brought me there to tell me something serious. Maybe she was sick. Maybe someone close to her had died. Maybe she was trying to ask me what I believed, without knowing how to say it. "Are you dying?" I asked quietly. She did not answer. After a while, I decided not to push. If she wanted to tell me, she would tell me eventually. But after that night, she barely spoke to me for days. It was not because I did not try. I texted. I called once. I tried to keep things casual, then more direct. She responded little or not at all. I started to think I had said the wrong thing. Maybe asking if she was dying had been too much. Maybe I had failed some kind of emotional test I did not know I was taking. Then, as if nothing had happened, she texted and asked if I wanted to come over. I waited a little while before answering because I did not want to seem desperate, even though I absolutely was. I already felt like she was out of my league, and if I could get more time with her, I was going to take it. When I arrived later that night, Rose seemed distant. She was there with me, standing in the same room, but she felt far away. Her smile was smaller. Her eyes moved past me instead of staying on me. I tried not to panic. I told myself she was tired. I cooked for her that night. It was a pasta dish with white sauce, butter, cream, herbs, and garlic. I wanted to call it Alfredo, but we only had spaghetti noodles, and calling it spaghetti felt wrong because there was no red sauce. It was one of those meals that tastes better than it looks, or at least that is what I hoped. I thought I was a decent cook. Rose did not seem to enjoy it. She pushed the pasta around on her plate without eating much. The silence between us grew heavier with every second. I could feel the breakup conversation coming. You know that feeling when the air changes and you know someone is about to say something that will hurt? That was what it felt like. Finally, I put my fork down. Before I could speak, she said, "There's just a little too much garlic for me." I almost gasped. Maybe we were not compatible after all. "Sorry," I said. "The wrong noodles probably didn't help. You said you usually don't have much food here, so I thought..." She cut me off. Do you love me? My brain stopped. If you have ever been hit with the "do you love me" question early in a relationship, you know how terrifying it can be. The right answer is always clear later, when you are alone and thinking about it. In the moment, it feels like stepping onto a bridge that may or may not collapse. It felt like a trap. Yes, I blurted. Then I coughed and cleared my throat, which made the answer sound fake, even though I had not meant it that way. The word had come out before I could stop it. I did not even know if I loved Rose. I did not know if I understood love at all. But something in me had answered before my mind could get in the way. For the first time that night, she smiled. "Really?" she asked. Now it felt like a trap placed on top of another trap. Had I answered correctly, or was she giving me a chance to take it back? I should have just said yes again. Instead, I tried to sound deep. It feels like when we're apart, my heart beats only because it has to. Even now, I cringe a little thinking about that line. But at the time, I meant it. My heart was pounding so hard that I thought she could hear it. Her smile widened. She looked truly happy. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "Want to go for a walk?" I almost laughed, but nothing came out. This girl was too much. She never came to my place. I always came to hers. And now, whenever I did, she wanted to wander around the forest in the middle of the night. Why could we not do something normal? Go to a movie, walk through a park in daylight, sit in a restaurant like ordinary people. But after what I had just said, how could I say no? I nodded, though with very little excitement. The change in her was instant. Her distant, sad mood vanished. She became bright and full of energy. Almost too much energy. She grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the door. This time, she brought no light at all, not even her phone. We entered the woods in almost complete darkness. I stumbled over roots and uneven ground while she moved through the trees like she had memorized every branch and stone. I held her hand tightly, partly because she told me to, and partly because I was afraid of losing her in the dark. I expected us to reach the waterfall again, but we did not. There was no path under our feet now. We slipped between trees, moving through narrow spaces where branches scratched my arms. The deeper we went, the stranger the air became. It felt stale, like the forest had stopped breathing. After a while, I saw flickers of orange light between the trees. Fire. Fire meant people. That should have made me feel better, but it did not. By then, we had to be at least a mile into the woods. I decided to try making a joke. "Is this where you take everyone who says they love you?" I expected her to laugh or say something playful. Instead, she said, "We are going to see the Lord." I stared at her. "Right," I said. Of course. Of course I had fallen for a complete lunatic. That thought passed through my mind so clearly that I almost laughed. But maybe I was the more insane one for still following her. Maybe I had been insane since the first time I saw her profile and let those green eyes pull me in. The orange flames grew brighter as we approached. They surrounded a wide area ahead of us like a barrier. The strange thing was, I felt no heat. Not even when we got close. The flames moved, but not like normal fire. They flickered too slowly, too smoothly, like they were pretending to be flames. Rose walked straight toward them. That was the first time I pulled my hand away. She turned and looked at me. "What's wrong?" she asked, as if the answer was not obvious. There were so many things wrong that I did not know where to start. Why were we in the woods again? Why were we walking toward fire? How did she know where to go with no light? Why did the flames give off no heat? Why had she said we were going to see the Lord? but I did not ask any of that. I only gestured toward the fire. She looked at it, then back at me. "You'll be okay," she said. "Just don't leave my side, and don't let go of my hand." She took my hand again and squeezed it. I swallowed hard. At that point, I told myself I had already made every bad decision possible. One more could not make things much worse. We walked into the flames. There was no heat, no pain, no smoke. It felt like stepping through cold air. Then we were inside a camp. I do not know how else to describe it. One second there were flames and trees. The next, there was a wide open space filled with people, music, movement, and light. The ground under our feet was covered in coarse gravel. Tall pillars of black stone rose around the camp, much taller than the trees. I had not seen them from outside the fire, but from inside, they were impossible to miss. Fires burned in metal bowls and stone pits, though none of them seemed to warm the air. People drank, danced, and laughed. Then they saw me. The music slowed. Whispers began. One by one, faces turned toward us. The people in the camp wore clothing that looked expensive and old, like something English royalty might have worn hundreds of years ago. Velvet, lace, embroidered coats, long dresses, polished boots, jewelry that caught the firelight. They looked elegant, but there was something wrong in the way they watched me. Suspicious, hungry, curious, Rose did not seem nervous, and I held on to that as my only comfort. A crowd began to gather around us as she led me forward. The whispers grew louder until they were almost rude enough to be shouting. We stopped in front of a large stone structure that looked too grand for a camp in the woods. It was decorated with dark cloth and strange carvings. Then a man walked out. I knew at once he was important. He wore black from head to toe. His coat was long, his boots heavy, and his presence made the crowd fall silent. The gravel crunched under his feet as he approached me. He looked me up and down. Then he looked at Rose with an expression that clearly said, "Really? This one?" Rose nodded. She looked determined. The man sighed and turned back to me. "Do you know what we are?" he asked. I was terrified, confused, and trying not to show either of those things. "Well dressed?" I said. It was a stupid answer, but I thought maybe a compliment might help. The man in black smirked. "You have been chosen," he said. "Do you know what that means?" "No," I said honestly, "but I imagine it's something good." He looked at Rose again, disappointed, then threw an arm around my shoulders and shouted to the crowd. "Tonight, we feast." The camp erupted. People cheered. Some clapped. Others laughed. Music started again, louder than before. The crowd broke apart and moved away, though many still glanced at me as they went. Rose kept holding my hand and led me to a smaller area away from the main crowd. There was a simple shelter there, made from cloth hung over two wooden poles. Compared to the rich tents and strange stone structures around the camp, it looked plain. She led me inside. Then, for the first time since we entered the fire, she let go of my hand. "I hope you survive," she said. Her green eyes looked into mine with such hope that for 1 second I almost forgot how horrifying those words were. Then my hands went numb. The numbness spread up my arms and through my chest. My legs weakened. I looked down and saw the veins in my hands rising under the skin, darker than normal, almost purple. "What did you do to me?" I asked. My head felt light. I fell to my knees. Rose moved around me calmly. She removed my clothes while I struggled to stay aware. I could not stop her. I could barely move. Then she placed a red robe over my shoulders. When I looked up again, she had removed her own clothes too. She wrapped herself around me, holding me close. It should have felt intimate. Instead, it felt like I was being prepared for something. My body would not move. My mouth would not form words. I tried to stay conscious, but my thoughts came slowly, like they were moving through thick water. After that, time broke apart. I remember being moved from place to place. I remember hands lifting me. I remember elderly women leaning over me. They pushed needles into my skin. They carved marks into my flesh. Then, they whispered into the wounds. The strange thing is, it did not hurt. It should have. I knew it should have. But I felt almost nothing. My body was there, but I was far away from it. I wondered if this was what it felt like to be a goldfish, unable to hold on to pain or memory for more than a few seconds. When they were finished, red-robed men carried me to a place that looked like it had been built in a hurry. They laid me on a slab of black stone, obsidian, I think. It was smooth and cold beneath me. They placed me down gently, like a baby in a crib. By then, whatever Rose had done to me was starting to fade just enough for fear to return. My neck still barely moved, but I could shift my eyes. Everyone around me wore red robes. Under the robes, they seemed to be dressed like I was, or rather, not dressed at all. The whole thing looked like some private ceremony or celebration, except I was not a guest. I was the centerpiece, like a roast placed in the middle of a holiday table. For the first time, I wondered if the feast was not for me. Maybe it was me. I forced my head to move slightly and saw Rose standing beside me. She was wearing a black robe, not red like the others. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and there were flowers woven into it. She looked almost like a bride. The chanting, singing, and cheering stopped all at once. The man in black spoke. "We have gathered here tonight to witness the miracle given to us," he said. His voice carried through the camp like he had done this many times before. To grow until the end of time. To never know sorrow, to never know defeat. The great proliferation. The crowd lifted their voices together. Praise He who is all and many. He who is all and many. I did not know what that meant. It sounded like their way of talking about God, but nothing around me felt holy. Nothing about this felt like marriage, or faith, or salvation in any way I understood. I tried to look at Rose again. Only then did I realize my hand was in hers. I did not know if she had taken it again, or if she had never really let go. The man in black continued. The cord that binds us is unseen, but ever present. Tonight, Rose has found her link with David. Tonight, he shall seek salvation, hearing my own name while lying there on a stone slab, helpless, half naked under a red robe, surrounded by strangers. It was one of the strangest moments of my life. It felt unreal. It felt almost romantic, in a horrible, twisted way. Earlier that night, I had told Rose that I loved her. I had thought that was the dangerous part of the evening. I had no idea. Does the betrothed have anything to say before the ritual begins? The man in black asked. He meant Rose. She stepped closer. Her eyes shone with excitement. Praise He who is all and many. She shouted. The crowd answered at once. He who is all and many. He who is all and many. He who is all and many. The chant grew louder and louder. Rose leaned over me and placed one hand on my face. For 1 second, I thought she was going to kiss me. She looked at me with such love, such warmth, that some confused part of me wanted to believe this would somehow be okay. Then she opened her mouth. No, she unhinged it. Her jaw stretched farther than any human jaw should. The skin at the corners of her mouth split and peeled back. I heard wet tearing sounds as flesh, tendon, and bone shifted in ways I cannot fully describe. Her teeth lengthened into thin, sharp points, like needles. Her mouth opened wider and wider, until her face looked less human and more like the mouth of some deep sea creature made for swallowing prey whole. The sound of her bones cracking drowned out the chanting. Then she clamped that broken mouth around my throat. Now I understood why I had been numbed. Dozens of teeth pierced my neck. Warm blood filled my throat and ran down my skin. I could feel it leaving me. I could hear her swallowing, loud, hungry gulps. The crowd went silent. Rose drank from me. The strange thing is, I do not remember pain. Looking back, that should frighten me more than anything. If I had been in agony, I think I would remember it. Instead, I remember feeling connected. More connected to someone than I had ever felt in my life. My mind could not fully understand the monster Rose had become, so it stopped trying. It all felt natural. It felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was lying in a field of flowers. An old oak tree stood above me, its branches spreading wide and giving shade. My head rested on something soft. The air smelled sweet and green. Birds sang somewhere nearby. For a moment, I thought I had died. Then I opened my eyes properly and saw Rose looking down at me. She was humming a tune I did not know. "I knew you'd survive," she said. Survive, the word felt wrong, considering what had happened to me. I sat up slowly. My body felt different. My vision was the same, but not the same. I could see things I had never noticed before. Not just shapes and colors, but movement in the air, tiny shifts, warmth, life. It was like the world had gained another layer. "It's probably best if I don't ask questions," I said. Rose smiled. "You learn quickly. The clan does not believe in marriage the way humans do. Not with rings, legal papers, or vows spoken in churches. But Rose and I were joined that night. What we became was close enough to marriage that I do not know what else to call it. Rose was a vampire. And now I am one too. Not the kind of vampire you see in movies. Honestly, those are easier to accept. Cleaner, more attractive, more human. What we are is different. When we feed, our jaws separate from the normal shape of our faces. It does not hurt. It feels almost like stretching your shoulders after sitting too long. The bones shift, the skin opens, and the mouth becomes what it needs to become. The first time it happened to me, I vomited afterward. Rose laughed and said everyone does the first time. Blood heals us. While we feed, our bodies repair themselves almost immediately. Cuts close, bones set, burns fade. Even serious wounds become temporary if we have enough blood. It is an incredible gift, if you are willing to call it a gift. The clan is everywhere. I know that sounds impossible. It sounds like something a paranoid person would say. But after 6 years, I have seen enough to know it is true. They have worked their way into every level of society. I have met celebrities, business leaders, politicians, old money families, famous artists, and people the world believes died long ago. Some were at my proliferation, watching from the crowd in their fine clothes while Rose drank from my neck. The clan's history is strange and old. They say it began with Henry VIII. According to the story, Henry wanted a son more than anything, a male heir, a child to secure his line and his legacy. Eventually, he made a contract with He who is all and many. People who witnessed the meeting said Henry had made a deal with the devil. Soon after, his son was born. But the child was not normal. His teeth were sharp like daggers. He would not eat normal food. He cried for blood instead of milk. Henry had asked for an heir and received something else entirely, something that terrified him. The child was sent away. His mother was executed. The child was meant to die as part of that same blood-soaked history, but he could not be killed by any method they knew at the time. So instead, he was banished. If the child's own story is to be believed, he was raised by the wind. Eventually, he created the first camp, the first gathering place, the first true family of our kind. The man in black is said to be that child. Once you become what we are, you cannot have children. Not naturally. But we also do not die by normal means. A stake through the heart will not kill us. It hurts, of course, but from what I have been told, it is more of an inconvenience than an ending. Sunlight is uncomfortable, but not usually fatal. It feels like a terrible sunburn if you stay out too long. Garlic tastes sour and unpleasant. That part is real, and for me it is probably the most annoying part of being what I am. The only true way to kill a vampire is by severing the cord. Very few in the clan understand what that means. Trying to learn is forbidden. Trying to discover how to kill one of us is punished by something worse than death, and I do not say that lightly. I have seen what they can do to people who break their laws. Death would be mercy. That night in the forest happened 6 years ago. 6 years since Rose took my hand and led me through the trees. 6 years since I told her I loved her over a plate of pasta with too much garlic. 6 years since the flames that gave off no heat. 6 years since the man in black looked at me like I was a disappointing animal and then welcomed me into the feast. For most of those 6 years, I stayed quiet. I learned the rules. I stayed close to Rose. I met others like us. I fed when I had to. I tried to hold on to the person I used to be, though I do not know how much of him is left now. Rose said the change made us free. Sometimes I believed her. Sometimes, when the hunger was quiet and the night was clear, I loved her so much that I believed anything she told me. But Rose is dead now. The man in black killed her. I will not describe how. Some details are too dangerous to write, and some memories still hurt too much. All I can say is that she crossed him. Or maybe he decided she had become a threat. With him, it is hard to know the difference. He does not rage. He does not shout. He simply decides, and once he decides, the cord tightens. Now they are coming for me too. I can feel them moving closer. The clan knows I have run. They know I have spoken to people I should not have spoken to. They know I am writing this. Maybe they knew before I even opened my laptop. Maybe the cord told them. Maybe he who is all and many hears everything. I am not strong enough to fight them. I know that. But if I am going to die, or if something worse than death is waiting for me, I want someone outside the clan to know the truth. I want someone to understand that the old stories are wrong, but not completely. Vampires are real. They are not pale nobles sleeping in coffins. They are not charming immortals afraid of crosses and sunlight. They are in your cities. They are in your boardrooms. They are in your governments, your theaters, your banks, your old families, your quiet neighborhoods, and maybe even your dating apps. Sometimes they have red hair and emerald eyes. Sometimes they ask if you are afraid to die. And sometimes, if you are lonely enough, you take their hand and follow them into the trees. Story 3. I work as a data entry clerk, and to this day, I remember every detail of the night that changed my life. Before that night, My job was the most boring thing in the world. It was not dangerous, it was not exciting, it was not even interesting enough to complain about properly. I sat at a computer for 8 to 10 hours a day and typed numbers from scanned paper invoices into a digital database. That was it. One number after another. One invoice after another. The same screen. The same keyboard. The same dull ache behind my eyes by the end of every shift. The company worked out of an old commercial building that looked like it should have been shut down years ago. The carpet was stained a lifeless gray, with dark patches that no cleaner could remove. The ceiling tiles sagged in places from old water damage. Some of them had brown rings spreading across them like bruises. The ventilation system never stopped humming. It was loud enough that after a few hours, you stopped noticing it, but when you went home, you could still hear it in your head. There were no windows on our floor. That was the worst part. Every day felt like sitting inside a concrete box, breathing recycled air and watching the clock move slower than it should. You could never tell if it was sunny outside, raining, or already dark. The light above us was always the same sick white glow, and after a while, it made everyone look tired and half dead. Because I was the newest employee in the department, I usually got the biggest stack of invoices to process. Everyone else had been there longer, so they had found ways to push the worst work onto me. They were not cruel about it. They just did it in the way office workers do things, with fake smiles and soft voices and little jokes about paying your dues. That meant I stayed late a lot. I hated staying late, but I needed the job. I had rent, bills, and student loans that took bites out of my bank account every month. So I kept my head down, typed my numbers, and pretended I did not notice how empty the office felt after everyone else went home. My cubicle was at the very back of the floor, right next to the manager's private office. That was another thing I hated. My manager was a quiet man who always looked too neat. He wore long-sleeved shirts buttoned all the way up to his throat, even when the building was warm. His dark trousers were always perfectly pressed. His shoes were polished. His hair never seemed out of place. I never saw him with coffee stains, loose threads, or wrinkles in his clothes. He looked less like a person and more like something carefully arranged to look like one. He almost never raised his voice. In fact, he barely spoke to anyone unless he had to. Most of the time, he stood in the doorway of his office with his hands folded in front of him, watching the employees on the floor. He did not blink much. That sounds like a small thing, but when someone is watching you from across a room and their eyes do not move, you notice. I never liked being near his office. There was always a strange smell coming from under his door. It was not strong enough for anyone to complain about, but it was always there. It smelled like old copper coins mixed with dry, rotting leaves. Sometimes, if the air conditioner kicked on at the wrong time, the smell drifted into my cubicle and made my stomach tighten. But the smell was not the worst part. The worst part was the sound. Every time he called me into his office to discuss my typing speed, correct an error, or hand me another stack of files, I heard it. His office was almost empty. It was clean and painfully neat. He had a metal desk, a computer monitor, a leather chair, and a massive wooden wardrobe pushed against the far wall. The wardrobe made no sense in that room. Everything else was modern and cold, but the wardrobe looked old. Very old. It was made from dark antique wood, heavy and polished, with 2 tall front doors and a solid brass lock holding them shut. Whenever I stood in front of his desk, waiting while he gave me instructions, I heard scratching from inside that wardrobe. Scratch, 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 then a muffled, high-pitched squeak would follow. It sounded frantic, desperate, like something small was trapped inside and scraping at the wood, trying to get out. The first time I heard it, I stopped speaking in the middle of a sentence and stared at the wardrobe. The manager looked at me. "Is there something wrong?" he asked. His voice was smooth. Too smooth. It had almost no emotion in it. "I heard something," I said. I pointed my pen toward the wardrobe. "It sounds like an animal is trapped in there." The manager smiled. I wish I could say it was a normal smile, but it was not. His eyes stayed still and cold. Only his lips moved, stretching tightly across his teeth until I could see his gums. "This building is very old," he said. "The walls are full of mice. They crawl through the gaps in the drywall behind the furniture. Do not worry about the sound. Building maintenance will set traps in the ceiling soon." I accepted that answer because it made sense. The building was falling apart. Old buildings got mice. Everyone knew that. It was not impossible. But even then, the sound bothered me. The scratching seemed too heavy for a mouse, and the squeaking did not sound like a normal rodent. It had a rhythm to it, a strange pattern. Sometimes it almost sounded like a voice trying to speak through a closed mouth. Over the next few weeks, I tried to ignore it. I wore headphones while I worked. I kept my eyes on the screen. I typed numbers until they stopped looking like numbers and became meaningless shapes. Every time I had to pass his office, I walked a little faster. During my second month on the job, I began noticing how often people disappeared from the department. We were not a big team. There were exactly 20 people on our floor. It should have been easy to notice when someone left, but the way people vanished made it feel wrong. In 4 weeks, 3 employees quit. At least, that was what we were told. They did not give 2 weeks' notice. They did not send goodbye emails. They did not pack up their desks or bring in boxes. They simply stopped showing up. One of them was the senior accountant. She sat 2 rows ahead of me in the cubicle grid. She was kind in a way that felt rare in that place. Every Friday, she brought donuts to the break room and told everyone to take one before the managers found them. She always wore the same gray cardigan because the office was too cold, and she had a blue mug with a chipped handle that she used every morning. One Monday, her desk was empty. Later that morning, we all received an automated email from the manager. It said she had decided to pursue other career opportunities, effective immediately. No one said much out loud. That was how office fear worked. Everyone noticed things. Everyone had questions. But no one wanted to be the person who asked them too loudly. During lunch, I asked the receptionist about it. "Did she say anything to you?" I asked. "About looking for another job?" The receptionist shook her head. She looked confused. "No," she said, and she left her favorite mug on her desk. Her cardigan is still hanging on the back of her chair, too. People usually take their personal stuff when they get a new job. Maybe it was a family emergency, I said, though I did not really believe it. "Maybe," she replied. Then she looked toward the manager's closed door and lowered her voice. "But she is the 3rd person this month to vanish like that. They always leave their things behind. And they always quit after working a late shift." That stayed with me. The senior accountant always stayed late on Fridays to finish payroll reports. The other 2 employees who had vanished also worked late often, trying to catch up on quotas. I told myself I was being paranoid. People quit terrible office jobs all the time. Sometimes they did it without warning. Sometimes they were too tired, too embarrassed, or too angry to come back for their things. There were normal explanations. There had to be. I needed the paycheck too badly to start believing strange ideas. Then came yesterday. I had a massive stack of scanned documents to enter into the system. By 6 in the evening, the office was mostly empty. By 7, only 4 of us were left. By 8, the others had packed their bags and gone home. After that, it was just me and the manager left on the floor. I sat at my desk typing as fast as I could, trying to finish the last batch so I could still catch the final bus home. The only sounds were the clicking of my keyboard and the heavy hum of the ventilation above me. At exactly 8:30, the manager's door opened. I did not look up right away. I kept my eyes on my screen and pretended to be completely focused. I heard his shoes tapping softly across the thin carpet. Then he stopped right behind my chair. "You are working late again," he said. I turned around and forced a polite smile. "Yes," I said. "I am almost done with the latest batch. I should be finished in about 20 minutes. "Good," he stared down at me without blinking. "I have an emergency meeting upstairs with the regional directors. I will be gone for about an hour. Make sure the floor lights are turned off if you leave before I return." "I will," I said quickly. He turned and walked toward the glass doors that led to the elevator hallway. I watched him press the call button. The elevator doors opened, he stepped inside, and then the metal doors slid shut. For the first time all evening, I breathed properly. The relief was immediate. I felt it in my shoulders, in my chest, in my hands. The office was still ugly and quiet, but with him gone, it felt less like a trap. I stood up to stretch my legs. My back cracked. My fingers ached from typing. I decided to walk to the break room for a cup of water before finishing the last stack of invoices. As I passed the manager's office, I noticed something strange. His door was open. Not fully open, just cracked a few inches. But that was unusual enough to make me stop. He always locked his office when he left. Always. He was obsessed with order, security, and privacy. He never forgot anything. He never left papers out of place. He never left his chair pushed back. He never left his door unlocked. But now, the door was open just enough for me to see inside. I stood there for a few seconds, looking through the gap into the dim room. The office was dark, lit only by the light spilling in from the cubicle floor. On his metal desk, placed perfectly in the center of the green desk blotter, was a set of keys. One of them was long and made of antique brass. The wardrobe key. Curiosity washed over me so hard that I felt dizzy. Then, fear followed right behind it. If I went into his office and he came back early, I would be fired. There would be no warning, no second chance. Sneaking into a manager's private office was the kind of thing companies treated like a crime. I would lose my income. I would fall behind on rent. I would have no way to explain it to anyone without sounding insane. So I made myself walk away. I went to the break room. I drank water. I stared at the vending machine for a while. Then I went back to my desk and tried to work. I typed 3 lines of data. Then I stopped. My mind kept returning to the door, the keys, the wardrobe, the scratching. I forced myself to keep typing, but the numbers blurred together. I entered the wrong invoice code twice and had to delete it. My hands felt restless on the keyboard. Then the silence of the floor broke. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound came from the manager's office. Then came the muffled squeak. This time, with the office door cracked open, it was clearer. It sounded like someone pleading. I looked at the elevator display above the glass doors. The indicator showed the car was still on the top floor. The manager was in his meeting. He had said he would be gone for an hour. If I went in quickly, opened the wardrobe, and looked inside, I could finally know what was making the sound. If it was just mice, I would close it again and forget the whole thing. If it was an animal trapped inside, I could help it. No one would ever know. I stood up. Before going near the office, I walked to the front of the floor and checked the glass doors. The hallway was empty. Then, I checked the break room. Empty, the bathrooms. Empty, I was completely alone. I returned to the manager's office and gently pushed the door open. The hinges made a soft sound that seemed far too loud. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, leaving it cracked just enough that I would hear the elevator if it started moving. I pulled my phone from my pocket and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut across the office. Everything was neat. Too neat. The metal desk. The leather chair. The computer monitor turned off, its black screen reflecting my small, nervous shape. And beyond that, the wardrobe. I walked to the desk and picked up the keys. The metal was cold in my palm. The scratching stopped. The room went completely silent. I turned toward the wardrobe. My heart was beating fast now. Each step toward the dark wooden doors felt wrong. The brass lock shone in the light from my phone. I slid the old key into it. It fit perfectly. I turned it. The lock clicked. The sound was loud enough to make me flinch. I grabbed both brass handles and pulled the wardrobe doors open. Then I pointed my phone flashlight inside. There were no mice. There were no animals. There were no coats, shelves, boxes, or office supplies. The inside of the wardrobe was impossible. It was much deeper than it should have been. From the outside, it looked like a normal wardrobe, maybe a little larger than usual. But inside, the space seemed to stretch backward into darkness. The entire bottom half was filled with shredded paper. Not just loose piles of it, but thick layers packed tightly together. The strips had been woven carefully into a large bowl-shaped nest. For a few seconds, I just stared. My mind could not understand what I was looking at. Then I noticed the writing on some of the larger pieces of paper. Blue company letterheads, employee names, confidential labels. They were HR files, destroyed documents, personal records, employee information. All of it had been shredded and woven into a bed. I took one slow step closer and shone the light directly into the center of the nest. Dozens of small white objects gleamed back at me. At first, I did not understand what they were. Then my stomach twisted. Teeth. Human teeth. Molars, incisors, canines. They were clean, almost polished. They had been arranged in a careful circle around the inside of the nest, like decoration. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop myself from gagging. In the center of the circle were 3 pieces of torn plastic, employee ID badges. They were scratched and chewed, but I could still read parts of them. The first one had the smiling photo of the senior accountant. The other 2 belonged to the employees who had supposedly quit earlier that month. The edges of the badges were covered in deep bite marks. Some of the marks went straight through the plastic. My hands began to shake. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave the building, get on the bus, and never come back. I wanted to pretend I had never opened the door, never touched the keys, never seen the teeth. Then the squeaking started again. It was coming from underneath the shredded paper in the back corner of the nest. I froze. The sound was soft and muffled. I reached forward with trembling fingers and pushed aside a thick layer of shredded HR files. Underneath, sitting on the bare wood, was a small black digital voice recorder. The screen was glowing faintly. It was playing an audio file. The volume was turned down extremely low, which explained why it sounded like a muffled squeak from outside the wardrobe. I leaned closer. The voice came from the tiny speaker. "Please," static crackled around the word. In the background, I could hear something tearing. "Help me. Somebody please help me. Let me go." The audio cut out. There were 2 seconds of silence. Then it started again. "Please help me. Somebody please help me. Let me go." I knew the voice. It was the senior accountant. A sharp click sounded behind me. I turned around so fast my phone almost flew out of my hand. The office door was shut. The handle was locked. Standing in front of the door, blocking my only way out, was the manager. He stood perfectly still with his hands folded neatly in front of him. He was smiling. His face was stretched so tightly across his teeth that it looked painful. "You are very quiet," he said. "I did not hear you leave your desk. I just came to look," I stammered. I backed up until my spine hit the open wardrobe doors. I thought there was an animal trapped in here. I wanted to help it. "There is an animal trapped in here," he said. He took one slow step toward me. "I always leave the door cracked," he continued. "I leave the keys right there on the desk where anyone can see them. It is a simple test." He took another step. "The employees who ignore the open door are safe. They do their jobs. They finish their quotas. They go home to their families." He moved closer to the desk. "But there is always someone who looks." His smile widened. "There is always someone who waits until the floor is empty. Someone who checks the hallway, the break room, the bathrooms. Someone who makes sure no one sees them enter, because they are so afraid of losing their job." My blood went cold. "You isolated yourself," he said softly. "You built your own cage. When you vanish tonight, everyone will assume you quit because the hours were too demanding. No one will come looking for you." "I won't say anything," I pleaded. My voice cracked. "I swear. Let me leave. I will never come back." The manager stopped smiling. His face went completely blank. "The suit is very uncomfortable," he whispered. Then he raised both hands to his forehead. He pressed his fingers against his skin at the hairline and dug his nails in. I watched in horror as he pulled downward. The skin of his face tore open. There was no blood. That made it worse. The sound was thick and wet, like heavy fabric ripping apart. He pulled the 2 halves of his face away from each other, exposing something dark and slick underneath. Then he grabbed the collar of his shirt and ripped it open, tearing the skin of his chest along with the cloth. He stepped out of the disguise. The empty human skin fell to the carpet with a wet slap. The thing standing in front of the door was not a man. It was huge, easily 7 feet tall, with its head brushing against the ceiling tiles. Its body was shaped almost like a human's, but only almost. It was too long, too thin in some places, and too wide in others. It was covered in dense, dark gray feathers that looked sharp and hard, overlapping like armor. Its arms hung nearly to the floor. At the ends of them were massive black talons, curved and sharp. They scraped against the carpet as it shifted its weight. But the head was the worst part. It looked something like an owl, but wrong. Stretched, distorted, its face was round and flat, with no beak. 2 enormous black eyes stared out from the center of that round face, swallowing the light from my phone and reflecting nothing. Then its head snapped to the left and kept turning. Its neck rotated all the way around until its face was upside down, staring at me from an impossible angle. A horizontal slit opened at the bottom of its face. "Please," it said. The voice came from the slit. It was the senior accountant's voice, exactly like the voice from the recorder. "Help me." Then it lunged. The creature moved so fast that my body reacted before my mind did. Its long arms shot forward, talons sweeping toward my chest. I dropped flat to the floor. The claws sliced through the air where my neck had been a second earlier. They slammed into the wardrobe doors and tore deep cuts through the antique wood. I scrambled under the metal desk on my hands and knees. The creature screamed. The sound was deafening. It shook the walls and made the monitor rattle on the desk above me. I covered my ears for half a second, then forced myself to keep moving. I crawled out from the other side of the desk, near the office door. The creature turned toward me. Its head spun upright again, and its empty black eyes locked on mine. I reached for the door, but it was locked. My shaking fingers fumbled with the handle. Then my hand brushed something cold and solid on the wall. The fire extinguisher. It was mounted in a metal bracket beside the office entrance. I grabbed it and pulled hard. It came loose with a metallic clatter. The cylinder was heavy in my hands, but fear made me stronger. The creature charged again. It raised its talons, ready to pin me to the wall. I gripped the fire extinguisher with both hands and swung it as hard as I could, aiming low. The metal tank smashed into the creature's left knee. There was a loud crack. The creature shrieked and collapsed. Its left leg bent backward at an angle no living thing should survive. It thrashed on the carpet, claws tearing through fabric and drywall as it tried to push itself back up. I pulled the safety pin out of the extinguisher with my teeth and spat it onto the floor. Then I grabbed the hose and aimed the nozzle straight at the creature's black eyes. I squeezed the handle. A blast of white foam exploded from the nozzle. It hit the creature directly in the face. The chemical foam covered its eyes and filled the slit of its mouth. It screamed again, dropping its talons and clawing at its own face, trying to wipe the foam away. It was blind. I dropped the extinguisher, twisted the lock on the door, threw it open, and ran. I sprinted across the dark office floor. I did not look back. Behind me, I heard something heavy dragging itself across the carpet. I heard claws scraping against the floor. I heard the senior accountant's voice crying, "Help me," again and again, but I knew better than to stop. I crashed through the glass doors, ran into the emergency stairwell, and flew down the steps so fast I nearly fell twice. I did not stop until I was outside on the street. The cold night air hit my face like water. I stood under a street lamp, gasping for breath, staring back at the building. The windows were dark. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. I walked 3 miles home because I was too scared to wait at a bus stop. When I reached my apartment, I locked the door, pushed my couch against it, and sat on the floor until sunrise. That was yesterday. I am not going back to work. They can fire me, they can send emails, they can call, they can threaten me with whatever company policy they want. I do not care. I am never stepping inside that building again. But I also know I cannot simply do nothing. That thing is still in the office. Maybe its leg is healing. Maybe it is already climbing back into that empty human skin. Maybe by tomorrow morning, it will stand in the doorway again, dressed in a buttoned shirt and pressed trousers, watching the employees type. Maybe it will send an automated email saying I have decided to pursue other career opportunities. Then, it will hire someone new. Another data entry clerk who needs the money too badly to ask questions. Another person who will be given too much work and forced to stay late. Another person whose cubicle will be placed right beside the manager's office. And one night, when the floor is empty, that person will hear scratching from inside the wardrobe. The door will be cracked open. The keys will be waiting on the desk. And the test will begin again. I do not know what to do. But if you ever work late in an old office building and hear something scratching behind a locked door, do not investigate it. Do not tell yourself you are just being helpful. Do not follow the sound. Some cages are built before you ever step inside them. Story 4. Has anyone ever had something happen to them that they could never explain, no matter how many times they thought about it? Something that sounds small when you say it out loud, but still makes your stomach feel cold years later. Because you know what you saw, and you know it did not make sense. I have one of those stories. I have never really liked talking about it, because it does not sound dramatic at first. Nobody got hurt. Nothing chased us. There was no monster in the hallway, no ghost standing at the end of the room, no bloody message on a wall. But that almost makes it worse for me. It was quiet. It was simple. It was something that slipped into the middle of a normal school day and then disappeared like it had never happened. I am sure there is probably some logical explanation. At least, I keep telling myself that. Maybe we misunderstood something. Maybe our timing was strange. Maybe there was some drill or schedule change that I never found out about. Maybe my memory has changed over the years. But I do not really believe that. Because I was there. And Brandon was there too. This happened when I was in 6th grade. I was about 11 or 12, old enough to know what was normal at school and what was not. It was not one of those memories from early childhood where everything feels dreamlike and mixed up. I remember this clearly. I remember the weather, the road, the way my sneakers sounded on the pavement, and the strange feeling that settled over everything when we realized no one was where they were supposed to be. My last class of the day was PE. At my school, we had to be able to run a mile in under 15 minutes. I do not remember if it was a state requirement or just something the school treated like one, but our gym teacher acted like it was very important. The school had a roundabout road that circled the entire building because there was only one entrance and one exit for cars. It looped around the front and the back, almost like a track, so our PE teacher used it for practice. To make a mile, we had to walk or run around the school about 4 times. Most kids hated it, but it was better than doing laps inside the gym, where the air always smelled like old rubber mats and sweat. Outside, at least, there was space to breathe. The school itself was not huge. It was a middle school, maybe one long main hallway with classrooms on both sides, a gym connected near the back, a cafeteria, a front office, and a few side halls. If someone shouted on one end of the building, you could usually hear it on the other. It was always noisy. Even when classes were going on, there was sound everywhere. Teachers talking, lockers slamming, chairs scraping, kids laughing, someone dropping a book, the hum of lights, the loud air conditioning kicking on and off. It was never completely quiet. That is important. On the day it happened, I was walking with my friend Brandon. Brandon was my only real friend at the time. I do not want to make him sound terrible, but he was not the easiest person to be around. He was the kind of kid who always thought he knew more than everyone else. He liked to say strange things and act like he understood secrets no one else did. He believed in weird theories, bragged too much, and acted like people should be impressed by him. He could be annoying. Honestly, he could be very narcissistic for a 6th grader. But he was my friend, and when you only have one friend, you do not think too hard about whether they are perfect. You are just glad you are not walking alone. So Brandon and I walked together during PE. Most of the other kids ran, or at least walked fast enough to finish quickly. Brandon and I were slower. We were not athletic, and we were not in a hurry. We stayed near the back from the beginning. The others pulled farther and farther ahead, their voices getting smaller as they turned the corners around the building. The road circled the school in a simple loop. There was the front side, where cars dropped students off in the morning. There was one side stretch, then the back of the building near the gym entrance, then another side stretch back toward the front. After 4 laps, we were supposed to stop at the back entrance and wait there until everyone finished. Usually, kids who finished early would sit on the curb, lean against the wall, or complain about being tired. By the time Brandon and I were on our last lap, almost everyone was ahead of us. That was normal. We could see one student not too far in front of us. I do not remember who he was. I can see the shape of him in my memory more than his face. He was maybe 20 or 30 yards ahead, walking faster than us. The day itself felt normal then. The light was normal. The air was normal. I do not remember it being stormy or dark or anything like that. It was just an average school day, the kind you do not expect to remember at all. We were coming around the corner toward the front of the school when the student ahead of us suddenly started running. It was not like he sprinted in fear. He just picked up speed, like maybe he wanted to finish the last stretch quickly. He cut the corner around the front of the building, and for a few seconds, we lost sight of him. That should have been fine. The road went around the school, so once we reached the front side, we should have seen him again. Even if he was running, there was only so far he could go. The front of the school was open enough that you could see down the road. Unless he had suddenly become unbelievably fast, he should still have been visible. But when Brandon and I made it around the corner, he was gone, not far ahead, not turning another corner, not standing by the doors. Gone, I remember slowing down and looking around. Where did he go? I asked. Brandon looked confused too. Maybe he ran inside, but that did not make sense. We were not supposed to go inside until PE was over, and the closest doors were still ahead of us. Also, there was no way he could have reached them, opened them, and vanished completely in the few seconds we had lost sight of him. Still, we kept walking. We did not panic. Not then. It was weird, but not frightening yet. Kids are good at explaining away strange things, because school is already full of strange rules and sudden changes. Maybe he had cut through a door we did not notice. Maybe he was faster than we thought. Maybe we had looked away longer than we remembered. Brandon and I continued around the front and along the side of the building. The first real sign that something was wrong came when we reached the back. Everyone was supposed to be there. That was the rule. After 4 laps, we met at the back entrance near the gym. The faster kids always finished first, and waited there. There should have been a group of students sitting or standing around. Our gym teacher should have been nearby. There should have been voices, jokes, complaints, footsteps, the normal noise of a class full of 6th graders who had just been forced to exercise. But the back of the school was empty. Completely empty. Brandon and I stopped. The back entrance was closed. The pavement was empty. No kids, no teacher, no one leaning against the wall, no one sitting on the curb, no one walking around the side of the building, no one anywhere. At first, we just stared. Did they go inside? I asked. Brandon frowned. Maybe they forgot us. That was possible, in a sad kind of way. Since we were always slow and always near the back, it would not have been shocking if the teacher had taken the rest of the class inside without checking for us. We were both annoyed more than scared for a moment. We went to the back door and tried to open it. It was locked. That made the situation more irritating and strange. If the class had gone in through that door, why was it locked now? Maybe it locked automatically. Maybe someone shut it behind them. Maybe we were supposed to walk around to the front. So we did. Brandon and I started walking again, this time toward the front entrance. The school building felt different now. I cannot explain exactly when the feeling changed, but somewhere between the empty back entrance and the front doors, the normal day started to feel wrong. The air felt still. The school windows looked dark, not because there were no lights, but because they seemed empty behind the glass. I remember looking at one classroom window and expecting to see students at desks, a teacher standing at the board, or even just movement. But I did not see anything. We got to the front doors and went inside. The front office was right near the entrance. Normally, there was always someone there. A secretary behind the desk, a student waiting with a late pass, a teacher asking for copies, a parent signing something. The office phones ringing, the printer making noise, someone talking over the intercom. But when we walked in, the front office was empty. There was no one behind the desk, no one sitting in the chairs, no voices, no phone ringing. I remember stopping just inside the door and looking through the office window. Papers were on the desk. A chair was pushed back slightly. It looked like people should have been there, but they were not. Brandon did not say anything. That was strange by itself, because Brandon always had something to say. He liked to explain things, even when he did not know what he was talking about, but at that moment, he was quiet. We walked down the hall toward the gym. Our footsteps sounded too loud. That is one of the details that still bothers me. Every school has a sound. Even when classes are quiet, there is always background noise. The building breathes. Lights buzz. Air vents hum. Somewhere, a door closes. Somewhere, someone coughs. Somewhere, a teacher's voice carries through a wall. But the school was silent. Not just quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you have stepped into a place that is pretending to be familiar. We reached the gym. No one was there. The lights were on, but the gym was empty. No basketballs bouncing. No students sitting on the bleachers. No gym teacher with a whistle. No class. No echo of voices. Just the polished floor, the folded bleachers, and the wide empty space. That was when the fear really hit me. I looked at Brandon and he looked back at me. For once, he did not seem smug or full of himself. He looked like a scared kid. Which is exactly what he was. Exactly what we both were. "Where is everybody?" I asked. He shook his head. We decided to check the school. I do not know why. Maybe we thought we would find everyone in another hallway. Maybe there had been an assembly. Maybe there had been some emergency drill, and everyone had gone outside to a different place. Maybe the whole school had been moved to the cafeteria for some reason. We were trying to find any normal answer. So we walked. We checked the main hallway first. Every classroom we looked into was empty. Desks were there, chairs were there, some lights were on, some doors were open, but there were no students, no teachers, no bags on chairs, no papers being handed out, no one writing on the whiteboard. It was like the whole school had been abandoned in the middle of the day. We checked another hallway. Nothing. We passed lockers, posters, bulletin boards with student work, and trophy cases. Everything looked normal except for the absence of people. That made it worse. If the building had been dark or damaged or different, maybe my brain could have accepted that we were somewhere else. But it looked exactly like our school. Just empty. We went by the cafeteria. Empty, we checked near the library. Empty, we walked past the bathrooms, and I remember Brandon pushing one door open just enough to call. "Hello?" His voice echoed strangely. No answer. I do not know exactly how long we walked around. It felt like a long time, but it was probably about 10 minutes, maybe less. But 10 minutes in an empty school, when you know it should be full of people, feels much longer than 10 minutes. At some point, I started to feel like we should not be there. That feeling is hard to explain. It was not just fear of being alone. It was more like the building itself did not want us inside. The halls felt too long. The corners felt too still. I kept expecting to turn and see someone at the end of the hallway, but there was never anyone there. Brandon tried to act calm, but I could hear it in his breathing. He was scared too. Maybe there was a lockdown or something, he said. That does not make sense, I said. Then why would nobody be in the classrooms? Maybe they evacuated. Then why didn't we hear anything? He did not answer. That was the problem with every explanation. It broke as soon as we touched it. If there had been a drill, where were the alarms? If the school had evacuated, why had no one told us? If everyone was outside, why had the back entrance been empty? If the class went inside, why was the entire school empty? Nothing fit. Eventually, we went back to the front entrance. Neither of us said we were scared, but we both started walking faster. By the time we reached the doors, I wanted to run. I pushed one open and stepped outside, expecting the world beyond the school to feel normal again. It did not. The front of the building was empty too. No cars moving through the roundabout, no parents, no staff, no students. The road around the school looked strangely clean and still. The sky looked normal, but the silence outside was almost as heavy as the silence inside. We walked around the building toward the back. I remember the whole time thinking that when we reached the back entrance again, it would still be empty. I was already trying to figure out what we would do next. Should we leave the school property? Should we walk to a nearby house? Should we go back inside and find a phone? Should we call someone if we could find an office phone that worked? Then we turned the corner. Everyone was there. The entire PE class was waiting at the back entrance. Students were talking, laughing, sitting on the curb, leaning against the wall. The gym teacher was there too. Everything was normal. The noise hit me so suddenly that it felt almost painful. Voices, footsteps, laughter, someone complaining about being tired, someone asking for water. It was like someone had unmuted the world. Brandon and I stopped walking for a second. I looked at him. He looked at me. Neither of us said anything. The same place that had been empty only minutes before was now full of people, not slowly filling up, not people returning from somewhere else. They were just there, as if they had been there the whole time. Nobody reacted to us in any strange way. No one said, "Where were you?" No one asked why we looked scared. No one seemed to think anything unusual had happened. We were just the two slow kids finally finishing the mile. The back door opened, and the class started going inside. Brandon and I followed. The moment we entered the building, the normal school noise had returned. I heard teachers talking. I heard lockers. I heard footsteps in the hall. I heard the office phone ringing faintly somewhere near the front. Everything that had been missing was back. It was not gradual. It was instant. The school was alive again. That might have been the strangest part. If we had asked someone where they had been, maybe we could have gotten an answer. Maybe the teacher would have said they had all gone inside and come back out. Maybe a student would have said there was a drill. Maybe someone would have laughed and told us we were being weird. But we did not ask. I think we were both too scared of the answer. Or maybe we were scared there would be no answer at all. What could we even say? Where did all of you go? Why was the school empty? Why was the office empty? Why was there no sound anywhere? Why did we walk through the whole building and find no one, only for all of you to appear back outside like nothing happened? Even as kids, we understood how insane that would sound. So we stayed quiet. We went back to class, or maybe the school day ended soon after. I honestly do not remember the rest of that afternoon clearly. I just remember sitting there and feeling strange, like I had come back from somewhere I was not supposed to be. Brandon and I did not talk about it much after that. That might sound unbelievable, because if something like that happened to two friends, you would think they would talk about it constantly. But we did not. Maybe we were embarrassed. Maybe we were afraid of being laughed at. Maybe we both wanted to pretend it had not happened. There were a few times after that when I almost brought it up. Once, a few weeks later, we were walking past the back entrance, and I remembered the empty pavement. I looked at Brandon, and I could tell from his face that he remembered too. But neither of us said anything. Another time, someone in class told a story about ghosts, and Brandon made some joke about places between places. He looked at me after he said it. Just for a second. Then he looked away. That was as close as we ever got. Years passed. I grew up, I left that school, I lost touch with Brandon, the way people often lose touch with childhood friends. Life moved on. But every now and then, I still think about that day. I have tried to explain it to myself so many times. Maybe we accidentally walked into the school during some kind of evacuation, and everyone returned just after we left. But that does not explain why we heard no alarms, no voices, no buses, no movement, and why the back entrance was empty before and full a few minutes later. Maybe we missed everyone because they were in one part of the building we did not check. But we walked through the main areas. The school was small, we would have heard something. Maybe the entire class went somewhere else and came back. But the timing does not work. Maybe Brandon and I somehow lost more time than we realized. But we were not gone long. It felt like 10 minutes, and when we returned, no one acted like we had been missing. Maybe it was a dream or a false memory. But if it was, why did Brandon remember it too? Why did we both react the same way? Why did he look at me afterward with the same fear I felt? The explanation that scares me most is the one I cannot prove. For a short time, Brandon and I were somewhere else, not far away, not in another building, not in another world that looked different, somewhere that looked exactly like our school, but empty. A version of it with no students, no teachers, no office staff, no sound, and no life. And then, somehow, we walked back. I do not know what would have happened if we had stayed longer. I do not know what would have happened if we had opened more doors, or called out louder, or tried to use the office phone. I do not know if something would have answered eventually. I only know that when we left the building and walked around to the back, everything returned. Or maybe we returned. I still wonder about the student who was ahead of us, the one who ran around the corner and disappeared. I do not remember seeing him again with the class. Maybe he was there, and I was too frightened to notice. Maybe he had finished before us and blended into the group. But sometimes, late at night, I think about him. I think about how he was there 1 second and gone the next. I think about how Brandon and I were slow enough to fall behind, but fast enough to notice something was wrong. And I wonder if that kid saw the empty school too. I wonder if he made it back before we did. Or if he was the reason the silence noticed us. I know this is not the kind of story with a clear ending. There is no answer, no proof, no lesson except that sometimes the world feels solid until it suddenly does not. Sometimes a normal place can become wrong without changing its shape. Sometimes a school full of people can become an empty shell for 10 minutes, and then everyone can appear again as if they had been there all along. I have carried this memory for years, and I still do not know what happened to Brandon and me. If anyone has experienced something like this, or if anyone has any idea what could explain it, I would really like to hear it, because I have spent most of my life telling myself there must be a logical reason. But deep down, I am still that sixth grade kid standing in an empty middle school, listening to a silence that should not have been there, wondering where everyone went.